Carl Ruth, you're one of these few people that helps me so much because you go back to the basics, you go back to what's fact, you go back to what we really know, and you just help cut through a lot of noise. So thank you for that. I'm so excited to talk to you today, and welcome to the show.
Well, thanks. Thanks for that, and thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
There are so many assumptions going around, maybe more than ever before. What do you think Google really understands?
I think it's important to understand that I don't think when it comes to how Google processes a page that all that much has changed. It's really very basically going back to a TF-IDF kind of a concept, like a bag of words concepts, gets you very far in terms of figuring out how to rank a page. And I think even if they're not doing it quite like that, they're doing it so close enough that you can look at it quite simply as term frequency within ranking zones. And so it's not term frequency for an entire page. There are definitely different parts of the page that are more important than others, but it's term frequency within there. And getting your important term counts and benchmarking your important terms in those areas is still an extremely effective way to at least model how Google is understanding things and get effective results.
Yeah, that still works. You can try to think of all these sort of crazy new ideas, but the basics, like that foundation, is still the biggest thing that you can do. Without that, sort of nothing really works.
An original model is like a bag of words for the entire page, and that's not accurate. But I think you think about little mini bags, little mini bags of words for very important sections. And even if that's not exactly how Google is doing it, it's going to get you close enough that you're going to rank very well with that type of concept.
Yeah. Have you been able to test things around like how the content is written? Like for example, if words are closer to each other versus separate on the same page, because they could be in totally different parts, but or they could be really close together. Have you been able to see if there's a difference in that regard?
The thing is if you're writing, I speak English and I write in English. If you are writing good sentences about something, that's just going to happen naturally. I don't know if there's anything to test necessarily for that, and it's not anything that I'm overly concerned about, like how far, vectoring, for example. It's nothing I'm concerned about because if I'm writing on topic, I should be hitting, even if that's a thing, I should be hitting it anyway. So I can't say I haven't seen any data one way or another that convinces me that proximity of one word to another will impact rank. But when you're writing, that's going to happen. That simply must happen. Or you're writing a schizophrenic page where you might, you write one line here, and for some reason the related line is paragraphs away. That makes no sense to me, just in a practical sense. And so, just from a practical point of view, I don't worry about it whatsoever because it should happen naturally.
Yeah. The problem is we do probably see some schizophrenic pages now and then. Like some crazes do go crazy.
That is true.
You know,
There are schedules and they do rank, so that might be the evidence against proximity.
yeah. I wonder that also sort of like that same answer you gave sort of rules out if you've seen anything on the order in which things are presented, whether you put things close together, just not talking about words on a passage or something like that. You're talking about maybe consecutive headings or paragraphs or
Consecutive
things like that.
concepts.
Yeah.
No, no. I think when you think about how a page is structured from, say, a subheading, your sections, your H2s and your H3s, I don't think there's anything they must be in a particular order. If you're writing about a concept, it would make sense that whatever's most interesting to you is probably going to be towards the top. And what's least interesting is towards the bottom, and that might change person to person, but they're all covering the same topic. And I don't think there'd be a penalty for one person that has a preference to discuss this part of the topic versus that part of the topic. And I think that gets back to Google doesn't make any value judgments. They can't. It doesn't want to make value judgments. It's not saying like I'm a better computer after having read your article. Like that's not any part of the process. And so I think that kind of falls into that value judgment where I'm going to talk about this first and that second, or this first and that second and that third. I don't think there's any, that to me gets into the value judgment part of things, and it's nothing that Google would want as part of their algorithm.
Yeah. It's, but I ask it because I always have this question in my mind, which is like, there is an, there is like a order in which you can do that is maybe based on search demand, search volume, like however you want to call it, or impressions. And that's like, okay, this seems to be popular subtopic within this topic. But then there's also like psychology also describes a way of presenting information to people to guide them to a conversion, which sometimes doesn't align with those things. So it's there's always a little bit of a tension, and I'm always thinking, oh, is there any difference? And when I've deployed one or the other, it's never been on a test where I control it, so I never know what would have
Yeah.
happened otherwise.
No, well, there does seem to be more preference given to Google above the page, above the fold,
Oh
and I
yeah,
think that has to do with the amount that they crawl. There's more than one crawls, especially if you have a larger page or you've got heavier things on the page that would limit crawl. I think it's more of a crawl issue than anything. So if there's something that's really important to you in terms of rank, like we've got a primary keyword and we're going after this in this secondary term that's a people also ask that everybody's asking, I would get that towards the top of the page so I wouldn't have to worry about Google crawling it all the way to the bottom at some FAQ. If that was genuinely important to the business, then put it up as high as you can.
yeah. Like when I was mentioning this, I was sort of thinking on like in in the general flow of the structure, but yeah, like the above the fold, I have seen that it makes a big difference to put like Google needs to really understand what the page is about without confusion. Like it's going to be 100% sure what you're targeting, what's important, what's going to happen on the rest of the page, and that makes a massive difference. So
Also, without spending a lot of money,
yes,
without spending a lot of money in the crawl, and so you have to figure their first crawl is going to be very limited, and so that's probably only going to go a section or two deep on your site. I think about 50 kilobytes would be the number that people like to throw out,
yeah,
not counting images. But if it gets like trapped in a JavaScript vortex,
oh
you
yeah,
might have screwed yourself there as well. But if you think about that is it's more text than you think, but it's not that much, 50 kilobytes. So if something is genuinely important to you and to what you're trying to rank or the client you're trying to service, you probably want to get those concepts within that 50 kilobytes, and that might be the guiding principle as to what the flow of the page is going to be.
yeah. Do you think do you think navigation gets in the way of that, or do you think they're the sort of thing? Okay, navigation is sort of a separate thing. I'll try to leave it out and try to identify where the actual content starts, which might be easy for a human, but not easy for a machine, as you well know, as when you build pop. I'm pretty sure you ran into that.
It's a great question. That's one that I think everybody goes back and forth on. You can definitely see that um, Google will follow those links for indexing purposes. Those links do seem to factor in somewhat on page scoring. When you like have a header, you remove a header, you can see differences, both positive and negative. So they're definitely considering it, but I would think and this is not my work, but the 50 kilobytes I think is being isolated as text, like what is seen within paragraph tags, lists or tables would count as paragraph text. So like within the HTML structure, anything with a p tag, an li tag, or a table tag.
Right. Okay, so sort of stripping all the HTML code and all that, and just looking at the text.
Getting down to that actual text. I think that's what they're trying to isolate. Understanding that there are menus and large menus and their headers and sidebars and footers and all that does factor into to what is on your page for sure. But when it comes to maybe that initial sweep, that's probably within something that they're trying to isolate text.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just remembering something about this. That there's this guy in Australia. His name is Dejan.
I know a few of them.
Yeah, Petrovich, I think, or something
Uh-huh.
like
I
that.
know him.
He's
Yeah.
like a big SEO, like a AI guy, and he like Google released this sort of shopping classifier to identify if your page is a shopping page. And in
Okay.
theory, it was sort of looking at, I don't remember exactly, but it's like 400 words or something like that.
Sure.
So I was like, which 400 words? Like, what counts? Like, if you have this massive
The
mega
first.
menu, am I eating all my 400
Yeah,
words
yeah,
or
yeah.
something?
I see what you mean. Yeah, because that's going to have it's going to have its anchor text designation. So I imagine they probably would ignore that to try to get to actual text.
Yeah. Yeah. To finish that point, the guy eventually built sort of a demo of how it was supposed to work, like using
Okay.
Gemini and whatnot. And it turns out it was enough words for a normally designed page for it to arrive to the products, or if it was a product page to arrive to the pricing and that part. And it was sort of
Okay.
obvious which pages were actually shopping pages and all. So the threshold was good. That's what I'm saying.
Sure.
Way better than, maybe those 50 kilobytes that, I don't know, maybe it's not that much.
Yeah, I mean that sounds about right. I mean that I don't couldn't discount it just on what you're saying. It sounds about to fit with what other people are saying as well.
Just because we're touching on the AI subject, Google really has been tweaking things, because like they're not going to run like AI detection or something like that on the internet. Like that would be sort of a crazy thought, but they must have somehow turned some factors up that maybe expose the weaknesses of it or something like that. Like what have you
Oh,
seen
sure.
in that sense?
Oh, this is my whole case. I've done a case study on this for the last year and some change.
Wow. Okay. Let's go
Did
into
you
it.
know that?
No.
Just lobbing up a softball. Oh, I've been working on this. This has been my project for the last year. Yeah, here was my thought. I was like, what is the baseline content that we get out of LLMs from an SEO perspective? So what I did is I ran two prompts. Prompt number one was, I want 1,000 word article on what to see in Rome. And that's it. Prompt two, so I could get a comparison line, was I want a 1,000 word article on what to see in Rome that is SEO optimized. And what I'm attempting to find here is, with really no prompting, what content we get for our purposes. And so on the one, just kind of not really worrying about SEO, what is the article I'm going to get out of these things? And the other saying, hey, SEO this up for me. Like what is your understanding of that prompt? And what I found is they're garbage. They can't give us what we need for ranking purposes. Now, I've done the study 3 times. So starting last March and then just most recently this March, so 2 months ago.
Yeah.
What I found initially, they really couldn't hit the 1,000 words. You asked them for 1,000 words and only 3 gave 1,000 words or more. The best was Llama saying, when I was running it, it's like, doing its brrr, and it gets this little blue line and it says, dude, I can't write any more about this. Like,
Wow.
and it was only 565 words. And I was like, I feel like there's more to be said.
You could do like 20,000 words on what to do in Rome.
On what to see in Rome. And what I liked about that prompt too is like, there's a lot to see in Rome, and these are concepts that are going to be across a lot of citations. A lot of people talk about the Colosseum and the Vatican and the Spanish Steps and the food and the culture and the history. Like there's so much to write about. Yeah, 565 words is all like they could manage. But then I ran them through Page Optimizer Pro so I could pull the terms out and get counts. And the best score, so 2 Marches ago, when this was about a 60 in Pop. And for perspective, you get movement and SEO at 80. And only 2 or 3 were in like the 50s. The rest were garbage. If you want a tinfoil hat it, Gemma and what was the other one from Google were the 2 bottom scoring ones. If you want a tinfoil hat that. So then I said, I ran through like Flesh Kincaid, which is not a ranking factor, but they're all college level, which was interesting because when you think about the content you want on your website, you probably want around like 7th grade level. It's about the average that most people talk about. So they're somehow light on the amount of words, but somehow very dense in the content. But then here was the scary part. So in Pop, we give you a range of important terms. And so I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's kind of like, it was like 150 to 300 words. And I can tell you from a ranking perspective, you want to hit about the midpoint of that. You want about 200 words. So out of 1,000 words, 200 need to be those important terms that we were just talking about. The terms that Google's looking for in those very special areas, in your paragraph text, in your subheadings, in your titles. This was just isolating the paragraph text alone. So P tags, lists, and tables. We need about 200 to rank where we need to rank. 150 would be just limping into the ranking game, and the best was at 50. They were remarkably light, like crazy light. So then, and that was like the best one. I think the best one was 54. Get down to the bottom, we're at like 16. So out of I needed 1,000 words, you're giving me like 500. So even with that 500, there should be 100, right? If we're looking for a good number, and they're at like 16. So this is not great for our purposes, just out of the box, right? So then on the SEO optimized part of it, the scores improved. And I was like, okay, we're looking better. But then, Flesh Kincaid was still college. And then the word counts almost all dropped. I think all of them went down. We only had 2 now that were giving us 1,000. And these were all the top 9 or 10 at the time last March. Grok had not come out yet, or Grok came out the week. We'd already started the study, so Grok wasn't included. That's about the time frame we're talking about. Then, so word count went down, and the pop scores went up. Word count went down, and that was a red flag. And then I realized all but one stripped out important terms. They actually went down in the important terms that we need. And you could also see it in like Google's NLP API, which we ran it through, and Google's understanding of the page through their API, which I know isn't exact, but it is a sanity check. That went down. So almost all stripped out terms. So we asked it for an SEO version of that, and they did worse. The reason their scores went up is because they formatted the pages better. Their H2s got better. That was the one improvement, was that the structure of the page was a little bit more like what you would expect to see, but the content itself got worse. So 6 months later, run it again, and everything's changing in AI so fast, and the improvements are flying. They're still garbage. No improvement. Nominal improvement. The main improvement he saw is that most of them could get their word count where they needed to be, or at least close to it, but we're still 100 plus terms light. Easy. On both sides of the non-SEO'd prompt and then the SEO'd prompt. This is what I think is happening. To get now to your earlier question, Google, I think, knows that LLMs are terrible at contextual terms. The variations of the target term, it's contextual terms, the LSI, those types of words that are needed on the page, and I think they just turned up the knob a little bit. I think the last several updates through the end of 2024 through 2025 that a lot of people got hit by AI. I think all Google did was turn up the importance of contextual terms. LSI is more important than it ever was, and there's still probably people that tell you it's not a ranking factor, which is lovely. So what was really crazy then, you want some real world proof. And so I was doing all these consultations of these sites that were, going up and then just fall off a cliff. And I consulted with 12 of them. 10 of them told me they used AI to write this content with editing, but say editing for style, not necessarily editing for SEO purposes. 2 said they wrote all this themselves. Across the board, when you run it through POP, all of them were in that danger zone of super light on contextual terms. So I think 10 of them using the LLMs to create their content fell into the trap of what this is. It looks nice, but Google can't understand it. Google can't get the meaning out of it. And then 2 people just wrote themselves into straight up, just wrote themselves into that situation and just got lumped into all of these. It's the cheapest. It's such an elegant solution. It's so cheap and inexpensive for them because they've already got it built in. They just had to dial it up a couple notches, and then they can wipe out mass spam produced sites. Unfortunately, sites that we're doing a really good job, of course, always get caught up in those updates. All the sites that I was looking at were not gross sites. They were nice. They were providing a service. They were selling good products. I mean, they were good looking sites. But you could just see from a math perspective how when Google wants to get rid of these mass generated sites, which is what they're always concerned about, going back all the way from when I started. Now AI makes it more accessible for people to create them. All they have to do is just dial up contextual terms, and they could find all of these and just wipe them out.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned it because it's such an perfect way, like elegant way to sort of just find the type of content that they were actually trying to find, which otherwise might have been really hard. And maybe they just were just like us, sort of trying to write something and realizing these things, even though they're called language model, they are terrible at word diversity. Like if you could put it in a descriptive term.
Yeah, that's what I've been telling people because I've done this on a couple of my talks. I was like, it's incredible to me that a large language model is bad at language. What it's really good at is guessing. Yeah, it's good at guessing what you want. It's like a yes man with a little more info.
It's still like the thing is it outputs like dense information, but with not a variety of words.
Right.
Like I've seen that if you guide it through, if you could put like these contextual relevant terms within the outline, within the headings, it does a way better job because then sort of by definition, because it uses that as a base.
Yep.
That's how you get it to work a little bit better, like sort of maybe speed up the process. But man, if you just go, or if you ask it to just write it itself, man, it's going to miss so many terms.
It goes back to what, I've always taught, like, when you were in like 5th grade or 6th grade and, your English teacher, she told you you need to write an outline before you write this essay. And you're like, and then you went and wrote the essay and it was a terrible essay. because you lacked structure and you lacked focus and you lacked, meaning. And if you do the actual Roman numeral outline, so if you think of Roman numeral outline, your Roman numeral one, that's your H1 on the page. That's your page title as well, title tag. And then the A, B's, and C's and D's, those are all your H2s. And then you go in one, those are your H3s, and then you got your context. If you think about it in a Roman numeral outline, you get a much better result. And if you give the LLMs that, they give you a much better result as well. And so I don't think Google doesn't care if you're using AI to write. That's not the issue at all. What they care about is spam, and not adding anything to the conversation. And often LLMs are just a facsimile of a facsimile of information. It's somebody else's information. You're just kind of regurgitating it and you're not adding anything new to the conversation. If you take the time to write an outline, you can. Even with an AI, you can then put your perspective on it, kind of getting back to what we were talking about earlier. Whatever is important to you is probably going to go at the top. And that's, if you and I were to write the same article, they're probably going to be similar, but we're going to emphasize different things that we care about or we think are more important. And if you're guiding the AI in that way, then I think you're going to be in a much better spot.
I was also thinking that the depth of the SEO knowledge it had was to write better headings. Like when you were saying, like that was the difference between the optimized one and the not.
Yeah, that's what it thinks of SEO.
Maybe it's just because it's trained on, the whole internet's average of what SEO is, and most people have no clue how to rank anything, or like they just have some opinions and some stuff, and maybe maybe it's just like a consequence of just the general knowledge of the thing.
Yeah, it could be that it looked at all these pages and like, what, maybe if I just give them headings, maybe that's what they want. Maybe that's what they need.
Yeah. And about these websites that you were consulting on, did you find any of the other stuff that people seem to be attributing, at least, like, for example, high publication frequency, maybe too high, or the lack of it being like not having like brand search, like maybe not having other signals? Like, were they just pure websites, or were they like proper businesses and stuff like that?
Several were proper businesses, and so they would have the brand search that you're talking about. Yeah, they were just the normal websites you expect to see on the internet. But brand signals were there. A lot of them had a lot of eat signals. There were a few that were affiliate-ish, so that they aren't trying to give away all their information. But it didn't look terrible to me, especially in running, and not just an eyeball, but actually running an eat check. I've got that within my tool where I can run through, 40-ish terms, or like stuff that you can scrape and easily see if this is a real company or not. They all looked fine. They all were within the realm of all the other sites that were ranking. They weren't completely missing out on those signals. A lot had brand traffic. Was it the majority of their traffic? No, but
that's fine.
But the brand traffic was there. And I mean, the one common denominator was they were all so low in contextual terms, like ridiculously low. And so, I mean, the variations of the target terms. So the classic example is lawyer, attorney. You probably need to use them interchangeably somewhat, and none of them were keyword stuffing like the target term either, like some old school tactic that got them in trouble where they're just using the target term over. They weren't. Yeah. And they were using the target term, nor were they using contextual terms as well.
Dude, I've keyword stuffed a lot to see how that works, and it's hard to get an issue. Like, it's like people talk about it a lot, but you can just shove a page with all the words that are the same and nothing happens. Like, you usually just go up.
That's usually because most people don't have any benchmarks for what that term needs. Like if you were Ted Kubitis has a great example of like ranking for the word games. So like if you look at which is obviously an outlier type of term, right? Nobody's trying to rank for the term games, but he showed this one time. I think the average use of the word games of the top 10 pages was something like 3,000 times on a page. Which is a lovely example that he found. This was years and years ago. Yeah. But I'm sure it's still the same. I haven't looked it up, but he's like, so tell me again about keyword stuffing,
Yeah.
But like it varies keyword to keyword, word to niche to niche, and that makes sense because if you've got a one word term that's that broad, you're going to use that term a lot, and like a 2% density or something. I don't even know what that means. There's no guideline to it. You have to get the benchmarks for that term you're trying to rank for, and that's just the bottom line.
Yeah, like even like it's true. Like you are for sure okay if you're within the range of the first page
Yeah.
results. Like like
Mhm.
for sure. Like maybe there's a max somewhere in the algorithm, but if it is SERP dependent, like that's the safest way, I think. Just look at the SERPs, what's happening just there. Stick within that. Don't go, or you can go up, not maybe that much, and should be all right.
The secret is hiding in plain sight. Google doesn't hide the ball. They show you exactly what they want to rank, the type of page they want to rank, and what it should look like. Now there are ways to get a little more sophisticated, and maybe that's where tools come in,
Yeah,
but because it isn't just a top 10 average. But to your point, if you stayed within that average, you're never going to get hurt.
yeah,
You're never going to get hurt. Now, are you going to have is that going to be more effective to beat your competitors? No, there's a little more to it. But if you were just to use that as a principle and just take the mean, I bet you're going to get to page 3 or page 4 just with your on page, probably page 4 I would say on an average, just with that. And then you can power it up with links from there if that's what you want to do.
yeah. So you mentioned it's not just a top 10 average or something like. Can you go into how you see it?
Well, you need to find the pages that Google is actually rewarding for their on page, and that's something that I think we do rather effectively. And I can't go into proprietary
Yeah,
methods, but we aren't just looking at the top 10, we're looking at the ones we think that are actually being rewarded by Google. And then we also evaluate pages for like maybe this section's a little maxed out. They're probably getting diminishing returns, and we try to say limit when you find, say, one page that's really gone bonkers on anchor text.
yeah.
We have limiting factors to be like, maybe you don't need that much anchor text. That they're getting an advantage up to a certain point, but it's not beyond that. So it's also not an arms race. Just going to the max is not going to help you either, because there's more nuance to it than just that. Because there are times when you need to be more than your competitors. There are times you need to be with your competitors. There are times you need to be below your competitors, and that's all math that we're doing, like with the recommendations that we're giving.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Sometimes even having the contextual term once sort of isn't enough. Like sometimes it's not. There seems to be, especially when you're running through Google NLP and these whatever entity software or stuff like that. Like they just it's flagging that I don't have something on the page, but I know it's there. Sometimes it's two times or whatever. It's just not there. It's like, do you have any insight into what's going on with the contextual terms and you know how can you make sure that it's actually getting picked up?
Yeah, it's so Google's NLP API, when it pulls out the entities, you can think of those more as concepts. So just having the word existing on the page doesn't create the conceptual meaning
Hmm.
that Google needs. And so that's a great point, and people struggle with that all the time, especially when we get a lot of support questions about that.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I paid for Google's NLP API, through your tool, and it says it's not there, but can see it on the page. What's wrong with your tool? And it's like, first of all, that's their API. that's not that's not I'm not filtering that data. That's just what it is. But yeah, so think of especially through Google's NLP API, those semantic terms are conceptual terms. They're concepts of understanding, and so you need more contextual terms to then create that meaning. So you often, there's that blurry line because the word itself might be required to be on the page to present that meaning, but then there's those other terms that go around it, and really need more of those for Google to see it and understand it.
Maybe someone describes themselves as an attorney. They don't use the word lawyer, but they have all the other, legal, case, court, like other words. They're not going to rank very
It'd be
well
more. It'd be more.
for the other one, but it's going to understand what it
It'd be
is.
more like they call themselves an attorney, and then they start talking about their boat trip, to Miami, and then they wonder why Google doesn't understand that they're a lawyer. That's a bit of an extreme example, but that's kind of, I think, how it goes. It's just, you're not talking about the thing enough for Google to understand that that's what this page is supposed to represent.
Yeah. Fashion brands are like that, man. They're terrible. They,
Well,
they,
because they want minimalism,
they
right?
love minimalism and flowery language that means nothing.
Yeah.
Lots of adjectives and stuff. And man, it's like, man, just say what it is. Then do whatever you
Yeah.
want, but just say what it is.
That's actually a good point. Say what it is, and then get as colorful as you want to get with your descriptions.
Start with that. It actually helps I truly believe, like this is not from an SEO point of view, I truly believe it helps that the person has, as well as a bot, but the person really knows where they are and what the page they're looking at is what they were actually looking for in the most easy way to understand. This is what I'm here for. Okay, now I can read the rest. But if you start with something weird, they're not even sure it's the right page for them.
Exactly. And you got to figure, humans trained Google's model. Humans like that structure, and as it turns out, lo and behold, so do search engines, so do crawlers and scrapers. They all, have you, side note, playing with AI, trying to get it to do this or that. And there are times when it's like you ask it to do something directly and it's like done, and you look at it and you're like, that's not it at all. Or actually, a better example, you've finished working on one part of it, and then you start working on the other part, and that works, and it breaks this one. And you're like, hey, why'd that break? And it's like, oh, you wanted them both to work. Oh. And I feel like that's the conversation I've had with so many developers in my career. Oh, you wanted this to be a function. Oh, I just thought you wanted it to look and it's like, and the AI, did developers build in
Man,
this like natural resistance into the AI, and that's the struggles that we're having, where like
because they
break
built it,
things.
and we're just
Yeah,
continuing the
exactly.
fight we have all the time, but now through this
Yeah,
bloody
they
different
just put
interface.
themselves
Oh
into
no.
into this, and that's why, like, oh, you wanted a car with an engine. Oh, we just thought you wanted a car. It's kind of like the the conversation I feel like I have with devs constantly, and now I'm having that same conversation with AI as I try to build stuff.
I never thought about that, but now I'm not going to stop thinking about it, man.
Because you didn't define the car correctly, and that the car needed all of its parts and it needed to go.
Yeah, man.
I made an assumption that people thought vehicles should move, and in both cases, the developer and the AI, they've given you a car. I mean, what are you complaining about?
What do you mean? You only go
Oh, you
downhill.
wanted you wanted it to drive? Ah, why did you say that?
Oh man, oh, I'm going to think about that for a while. You've talked in the past a lot about it, and it's a great concept, like centerpiece annotation, and it goes into what we've been talking, like what is this page really about? It seems there's this site-wide thing now. Like maybe there's a
Yeah,
sort of site-wide
I totally agree.
centerpiece annotation or something like that.
Yeah, totally agree.
What are your thoughts on, like, just going back again to this question of the contextual terms and those websites that you were consulting on? One thing is at the page level, but maybe something even worse happens when it is at the site-wide level.
No, I think you're 100% correct. This is what I've been theorizing on with this as to why then a site gets hit. And my thought process is that, so for those that don't know, centerpiece annotation is the concept that Google comes in and tries to understand what a page is about. And then it goes through the sections on the page and it makes sure that those sections align with that concept that it thinks that the page is about. And if there are sections that aren't aligned, they get discounted. And then the more it gets discounted, then Google just discount the page. It's kind of like some point where Google's like, this has nothing to do with this, and then kind of falls off the cliff. It seems quite obvious that 2 years ago and some change, Google expanded this out to site-wide. And where I think that comes into play is when you think about Google thinks about what the concept of the site is, and then it looks at the pages that are there in the same way, kind of looking at the sections of the page. Now it's looking at the pages that are there, and if these pages don't seem to align with that central concept, it discounts those pages, and then there's some tipping point where it discounts the site. I think it's the exact same concept, works in the exact same way, just in a broader scale. And so now you had a site that had a couple hundred pages on it, and now you just put up 100 AI pages that are lacking contextual terms and Google doesn't understand it. Now a third of your site Google can't understand.
Yeah.
It thinks it's off that centerpiece annotation for the site. It'll just discount the site. There's no reason for it to crawl it anymore.
Yeah. I'm just so on board with all that because, like, I've been seeing for years how removing content that doesn't have impressions or any performance at all just boosts sites, and it's like it's probably just because of that, like, or it's a like cost thing, purely cost of crawling, or it's just, oh, now this site is really about this thing and not this weird mess that we don't know what it is.
You often see those sites that aren't getting those clicks. Like they say they're getting impressions on page, but they're not getting clicks. They just have nothing to do with the site, or they're not like the main point of the site.
Yeah.
And you can see why, maybe just from even a user perspective, click-through rate sort of thing. They're like, this is not the site that I want to get that information from.
I really like thinking about boundaries. We've just sort of talked about where a site goes off topic or something like that. How do you define, or how do you think about, when are you staying within this idea, like within this concept of a site, and you're not spreading yourself too thin and going into something else? And also, how do you go about expanding? Because there should be a way that you can expand into something slightly different if there's a commercial reason for it, I guess.
Well, to the second part, you think about Amazon went narrow and deep on books, and now they sell everything. But that didn't happen overnight. They started to add those sections after they had established themselves as a retailer, and they were retailing books.
And there's a caveat that massive websites get away with more stuff, so they're not
Everything.
really good examples. Like that's
The
not
bigger you
website.
are, yeah, the bigger you are, the more you can get away with for absolute certainty. I've heard this rumor that there's a place where you can't write about anything anymore, and I've yet to see an actual evidence of it. There are always questions that people are asking, but then there's also, every industry changes. Like, I'm pretty sure plumbers in the 80s were doing different things than plumbers in 2026 are doing. I bet they're using different tools, and I bet they are using different alloys, and I bet they're using different widgets. Whatever it is that they do. I have no plumbing knowledge. I hope that was clear from that.
A plumber will know, because I can't evaluate that either.
Exactly. I know I was getting a little technical there, but I'm really not that savvy when it comes to innovations in plumbing technology. Plum tech. But there's always something new. So here's a tip for you. You can subscribe to like industry magazines for whatever niche, and I'm sure there are in plumbing. But there's always a section about like the new models coming out, the new stuff that's coming out, or there's speculation that this is going to happen. So you can start writing articles about those now, even though that's coming out in 6 months, or it's coming out a year, or it's speculative. You can start writing articles about that, and you're just doing futurism. And then what happens is that when that thing hits, you've got a page that now has 6 months worth of age to it.
Yeah, you're ready to
So
go.
you don't have to look at the present to find things to write about. You can look to the future on what is coming down the pipeline. What are the new additions of this, that, or the other? The brands that people like to use for their tools. What's coming up on that? Some companies now creating a plant that's going to create this polymer that's going to blah, 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 blah. There's so much you can write about. And if you feel like you've tapped out in the present, which I find unlikely, because there's so many people also ask questions on every subject. But if you feel you've tapped out now, just start looking to the future, because there's a lot of stuff that's got to be coming down the pipeline, pun intended. I wish I was smart enough that I'd work that whole joke just for that punchline.
No.
Like I'd started with that example to get to that punchline, but I did get to the joke about halfway through.
Yeah, well, Matt, your brain made it work anyway. Not intentionally from the start.
But we got there. I was like, ooh, I know where I'm going.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's so much to write about what's coming up in any industry. So I don't think there's a place where it ends.
Yeah. I guess what people are maybe asking themselves a lot about is just like, am I going off topic? Not am I running out of topics? It's like, man, if I talk about this thing, maybe I'm just going too far away from what I'm about. And
So sanity check. Do like the main concept for a page, right? And then you see like the related terms. Click on one that's on your page. Something that's one of your H2s, and then see what that list looks like. And then if you should probably see another H2 or something that's very close to it or conceptually, and click on that. See how far you go. You get to a point where you're gone, and it's probably 4 or 5 clicks out, and you can kind of see where things go, like one level down, and then another level down, and another level down. And I think once you see that you're not writing about any of that stuff anymore, that's probably, you can see where it's gone too far.
yeah.
Just a real practical sanity check on the page. Just go through the related searches, because the related searches are, according to Google, related.
Related. They've changed over the years, right? Like, do you remember that before they were more like close variations to the original term, and now they are more
Correct.
like trying to guess that maybe the follow-up question or sort of like an intent-based
I think that's
thing?
right. It does feel like that way. It used to be much more of these are your related terms. They just
Yeah.
make of the 8 that they give or the 10 that they give, you want at least half on the page, if
Yeah.
not 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Now it's 2 or 3.
Yeah,
Now it's
now you
203,
can't go
right?
too hard on the, and sometimes they've got nothing to do with your page. They're sort of like the next question. They're sort of like maybe a lot of people refine that original search, and they're sort of
Sure.
trying to do that.
So that would be content that you can consider that might go on to your page as another section when you think about, okay, now we're getting out into the next, this is the next step of this concept. And that might be valuable to be on your page, or that might be valuable as like a supporting page.
Yeah.
Like, and then you can kind of interconnect things within your own site, kind of going deeper and deeper to those like next anticipated questions.
Yeah. Yeah. But sometimes I not necessarily use related searches, but that concept to maybe internal link to another page.
Yeah,
So let's say
I like
I've got
that.
an idea for another page from that, and I'll still
Mhm.
put that term on the main page or somewhere,
Yeah,
and I'll link from sort of maybe from that, not the heading itself, but the paragraph within that heading, and sort of do that.
sure.
It's easy to organize it at least, and some people think it makes a difference. I haven't tested it, but it looks good at least.
I think the more related terms, yeah, it does look good, right? And
Yeah.
at least it's a talking point with a client.
Looks good. Looks organized. Looks structured and stuff.
I'm on board.
You mentioned before people also asking that stuff. Like, are you still going like maybe one page, one of those questions, or are you grouping them onto one page? Like, how's that going for you?
This is the beauty of AI, is I scrape them or I grab them, and then through a weighting system of what I came up with a while ago, and just kind of how I like to look at them and how I like to think about them, I think we get out of the AI, and it does a pretty decent job of Kyle would put these on the page, and Kyle would create separate pages for these, and it's more accurate than I think I ever was.
Cool.
Like
Sort of based
so.
on on your expertise, basically. Like, this is normally what I
Yeah,
do, or you showed it examples of what you did in the past, and it's
that's right. I've actually a big part of my last month and some change, 2 months, has been building an AI version of myself, and it's actually going to sit inside of Page Optimizer Pro, and it'll answer your SEO questions for you.
oh, that's cool.
And the other thing too is it'll help you make decisions on like what pages to go after, how to set up silos, what content should be on there, competitor gap kind of stuff in the way that I think, because yeah, we're building, and it's going to kind of sit. You can think about it sitting on top of almost like a chat assistant, but it is a chat assistant that can actually run the tool.
Right.
And so even somebody's, I imagine most people listening to this are rather technical, especially if they've gotten to
Yeah,
this
yeah,
point
just
of the
go
talk.
deep. Just go deep. It's fine. Like, this, a beginner's
But
not
no,
going to watch this.
what I'm saying is I don't think we're talking to business owners at this point.
No.
But the unless they like my devilish good looks, the somebody that is not sophisticated can have a conversation with it and get it done. But here's the best part, though, for the techies that are still listening. A lot of people use tools like mine, and they feel like they're not getting the most out of it. And it actually, I think, causes them to leave because they have this like fear in their mind that they're missing something, they're not getting the maximum value, and maybe something else. And I think then they get shiny object, and they try something else, even if they are using it correctly. Now, I think they can have the confidence to do that. To kind of have somebody check their work and say like, yeah, this is good, or hey, do you want me to do it for you? This is how you do it, and it'll be done. This is also going to help kind of some of the small, medium-sized agencies too, where I think their speed will increase, where they don't have to do as much evaluation because Kyle can do that evaluation for you. Read the reports and make suggestions. So kind of take the data and filter it one more time.
Yeah. I think you got a good point there. Because I am a pop user, have been for years,
Cheers.
and yeah, well, it's a great tool, man. There are times where I've thought like, what does Kyle do with this information? Because I can come up with ways to use it, but I don't know what he does.
Sure.
That would be cool to know. Like,
Now,
what do
now
you
you're
do
gonna
with,
know.
what do you do with this part of the report? Like, man, because the first
Yeah.
the brief, pretty straightforward. I think everyone knows how to use that. But if you wanted to dig deep into, like that advanced analysis part, like the last two tabs maybe, stuff like that, like I was like,
Yeah.
what does Kyle do here? Like, that would be interesting to know.
Yeah. Happy. That's part of it. The annoying part is like I have to tell it, like I have to teach it how to go cancel a subscription, which is equally as important in terms of like order of operations for a bot that's going to work your tool, as is also like how do I set up an advanced strategy, and they both almost take the same amount of time to teach the AI.
You also got to tell it how to not make up stuff.
Dude,
The guardrails, that's the hardest
telling
part,
it
right?
not to lie like it's like I can't remember the MD file, but it's kind of like session. Do not fuck this up. kind kind of a line, and it's literally like don't if you don't know the answer, don't make something up.
Yeah.
You know, we have advanced support. You can get to advanced support.
Mm.
If you don't know, tell them you don't know. It is okay.
Yeah.
You know, and we can get them a human to support. But man, it wants to lie. It doesn't want to lie. It just wants to give an answer.
Yeah. Yeah. It just wants to give an answer no matter what.
Yeah, that's what it is. It really, really wants to be helpful, and it wants to give an answer. But there are times when I'm working with it, and I'm like, "Who told you this? I want a name." You know, and it's like, "Oh, you're right. That's not in my knowledge base." I'm like, "Then why are you doing it?"
Man,
Because
it's like the oh good catch like when it says that thing and you just
I
want to kill
hate
it.
that. The first time you're like, "Oh, hey, thanks, bud." The second time you're like, I feel like you should have caught this."
Man, we're like years deep into those type of responses now, so now we just hate it.
But for a while, I was like, why aren't you giving any? Because we have like a help center links for like more information, and there are times when that's helpful. I was like, why aren't you giving any of that? And it's like, I don't know where those are. And I was like, there's a whole file, and I'm like, oh, you're right. So then, so it wasn't giving any support links, and then all it wanted to do was give support links. It's like, check out this support, this support, this support. What else do you need? I'm like, how did we go from when appropriate like to first not getting any and then getting all of them, and you just have to like continue to like work it and work it and work it, and then like use case scenario, and then it breaks again, and we're like, we just solved this problem, my man.
Mm.
Oh, it's it's crazy and frustrating, but then it's kind of fun then when you ask it a pretty tough question and it comes off with like, that sounds like me. That's
That's cool.
yeah, that's how I would answer that question, you know, and it might not be the answer they want to hear, but that is the answer to that question. And I was like, well done, sir.
Man, that's
Well
cool.
done, Poppy. You can call it Pop, or you can talk to it and call it Pop or Poppy.
Well, you're for sure gonna have to name the thing. So
Yeah, you know, so you know, from a branding perspective, we really went around about not anybody upset, but just kind of like thought process wise, because like a lot of people are like, meet Susie, our new chat assistant, or you know, meet Billy, and I don't want people to think of it that way. I want people to think of this as the tool,
no,
you know. So this is just Pop.
it's just Pop. You're talking to Pop. Yeah.
Yeah, you are talking directly to Pop, and it's an AI version of Kyle, and the math is all Kyle's math, pretty much. With except my product lead Maria, she's contributed massively to that. But the foundation of it is my math.
Yeah.
Maria's enhanced it, and now you can talk to me about it, and we'll provide, and it's actually going to get some flavor from Maria as well, um,
That's
as
cool.
she thinks, because there's a lot that there's a lot about how she processes and how she thinks, and she's one of the top SEOs in the world. So yeah, you can basically have like two SEOs that have been melded into one. It definitely has my tone though.
Right.
Yeah, if you get down there, ask it who the best SEO in the world is, you'll like the answer.
All right, I'll do that. You built this tool from what you would say like the foundational counting mechanism that counts different things and tells you according
Yeah,
to your math what you should have and not. You've also expanded it into keyword research and coming up with a whole strategy. Can you
yeah,
talk to me a little bit about how it's making those decisions, like how it's coming up with the strategy, how it's coming up with those topics? Like, I know it's doing what you did basically at the agency, like at least that's what you're trying to build, but how it's making those decisions, like what's it trying to do?
that's actually honestly when my eyes started to open up to AI, because like the silo system that we have on how you can create supporting pages for your top level page. So the concept is if you launch a page within a zone or a tier that Google trusts you, you'll rank instantly for it, or quite quickly with minimal SEO effort. And the idea is then the internal links that you have on that page can now juice up other pages. So if you can strategically find terms that you can rank for with very little effort, they gain strength. You kind of raise the strength of the entire site, but you can raise the strength of target pages. And then I worked out like an internal linking structure that is effective to pass juice between pages that are meant to support one target page, and it all kind of works together. determining the tier or the level of the site, what the terms should be that are the supporting terms, in what manner they should link together. That process probably took 10 to 15 hours. And now we've got it down in a one-click silo that takes about 5 minutes. And and they work. They work better now than they even worked 2 years ago when I think we launched it. By the nature of how LLM search is working, this can help you get insertion in LLM as your own citation. We've done that a couple times. But also it helps with Google. Google still loves this. And what's great too is it update proofs your site because you're out researching your competitors. You're not doing anything that's outside Google's guidelines. This is well inside the guidelines. The trick is you are finding terms that often your competitors aren't going after that are actually quite valuable and can raise the strength of the site. So all of that was, a lot done by hand, kind of combining different processes from different tools in terms of, okay, we need this data from here, we need that data from there. And then we realized we can combine it and we can weight it properly, and we can do a lot of if this then thans sort of situations that are common that come up, and then the AI can get intuitive with that as well. And if within certain parameters are like, these are the scenarios, if it's a similar scenario, you can do the same, and it does a very good job with that. So a process in the agency to do the keyword research for that, the setup, and the linking structure, which would take easy 10 hours, it's our one-click silo, and it gets done in about 5 minutes,
Right.
5-6 minutes.
Yeah.
That to me has been most fun, like to take all of that stuff, and it makes fewer mistakes is the bigger thing too. It does a better job, honestly. The times it goes off the rails, it goes off the rails. It's usually pretty noticeable.
Yeah.
But you got to figure the error rate is so much lower than it was when we were doing this all by hand, and kind of transferring data from this sheet to that sheet. You're going to lose something. Something's going to go wrong. Now that just doesn't happen.
How's it coming up with the topics? Like, because one of the challenges with going with trying to find these keywords that maybe it's a very niche thing, or maybe it's something that, other people just don't write a lot. So by definition, it's hard to find. The problem with coming up with those topics is you can hit stuff that just not enough people are searching for it. Like there's no demand, and you can end up having like these pages that nobody search for. So you have this sort of dead weight growing and stuff like that. How do you do that?
Just as a little example, I was consulting with this site, and they said the exact same thing. I was like, your tier's pretty low, like much lower than you think it is. And I was like, we need to just do kind of, and they're like, but the search term for this page you want to build only has 8 to 12 clicks, 8 to 12 search volume. So that's 8 to 12 impressions, right? A month. And I was like, just go with me on this one. And so we launched the page, and within 5 days, it had 287 impressions.
Wow.
So, but any tool's going to tell you it's only going to get 8 to 12, and maybe there's a click in there. Now, it only had a click or two after it, but that's not the point. The point is it instantly started ranking because it was within their tier. It instantly started performing, and within 5 days, now their brand, in not getting 8 to 12 impressions, got 287 impressions, and that's significant, and that's a term that their competitors would avoid. When you can really see there's like a bell curve of accuracy, where when there's a lot of search volume on a term, the tools get accurate because they're all pulling from the same sources. When there's not a lot of information on a term, like especially when it's like under 50, crapshoot. Yeah. Like they don't, I would say even under 100, they don't 100. Really know.
That's what I use at least.
Yeah. So I love zero-click terms. I love, especially when it's on point. Like this makes a lot of sense. Like this should be on your site. This answers questions that somebody would obviously be answering. And this to me was like, it was a concept, and they have a really good site, by the way, and they're covering a lot of it. And so part of the trouble that I've got is finding things they haven't covered, I guess.
Right.
But in that, it was such a fun example to be able to show that, like, yeah, this looked like, I mean, it had 87 impressions in like 3 days, 280 whatever, 5 or 6 days. Like, that's a lot of impressions, really fast. That's a lot of brand exposure for one article that you put up that you thought was a throwaway.
Yeah.
And actually, it kind of is because it's actually living to support their target. The page is their money page. But also, if somebody came in through this, it's an easy transition to get to a more convertible page.
Yeah. Were those impressions like core of the term of the page? Like, was there basically was there a mistake in the search volume tool, which is super likely, or was this sort of capturing just other stuff that were related, but just you just didn't even know existed?
So there's lag in the data, and it's also not 100% correct. But I would say within that 5 days on the main term, it was already incorrect. Not by a lot, but within that it was already off. So you can tell in a month span, it's off by a factor. But then extremely close iterations. So not the exact term, but extremely close iterations or obvious iterations from it were driving a little bit more of that. But I would say 8 to 12 in 5 days, there were like 7 impressions, 8 impressions on that term.
Yeah.
But still, if you multiply that by that 4, we're well above 12.
Yeah.
But then when you do the very close iterations or obvious iterations, I think an obvious iteration is what I'd call the terms I was saying.
We're supposed to make decisions based on numbers, and we have to remember that we are also marketers and that people have needs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you have to trust when something makes sense to create, even if you don't have a tool to support it. Like, those are usually some of the easiest wins or the best wins that you can get. Because it's what you said, you're not competing with a lot of people or with anyone really.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that opportunity to, maybe that's where the creativity comes in, right? When you're looking at a list, they all look about the same. Now you're following, you have a list of 50 and you're only going to do 10. So, and they all score the same on the math up to that 50 point. Now you got to pick it out. Now you got to be the marketer.
Yeah. It's funny that we're SEOs, we're supposedly the boring marketers and stuff like that. We're saying this, and like most brand people that I know, they talk about creativity in like the flowery language, really, and not just this type of stuff. So it's just kind of funny to hear you say that.
I'm coming up with ideas all the time. You have to know where to look, right? That's the thing. Like, you can do all the math you want, but if you don't know, where to look for the math, it's not going to matter, right?
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of cool consulting projects and stuff like that where you're seeing things. What's another cool thing you're seeing, or another cool test that you can share?
So I just recently did this last month for April. We wanted to look at the scores of first runs in pub. So not a rerun where somebody's made any changes, but just this is either a page that they wrote, a page that the client wrote, but it's an existing page on the site. So not like if they do a run where they haven't built the page yet, right?
Yeah, they haven't worked on it. It's the first version.
It is the theory, or it's like this is how it's coming into the tool. And an assumption that I'm making is that a lot of this is AI content. The vast majority of people are using LLMs to write this content, and they've written it, and then they realize it's not maybe doing anything, or they want to improve it or check it, whatever. This is the first run. So it's 10,000 runs, which is about a week's worth of runs within the tool. And something that was amazing, like 3 big things that stood out. We're going to do a bigger study on this, but 45% didn't have any schema on them. So a decent amount lacking kind of basic structure, right? And that's not, the existence of schema in and of itself is not a ranking factor, but you can link schema together. You can do allow schema. It can lead to a ranking factor, I think, for sure, especially in conjunction with other factors.
Yeah.
So out of the box, you got to figure, all right, LLMs are not providing this type of structure that people need. But then 99.4% were missing contextual terms.
What you said before, like it's just the same thing.
But it's not just some, literally all. And the average miss was 22 terms, which isn't a lot, but that's a deceiving stat. Because the ones that did it correctly did it really well.
Okay.
And it's one of those things where the numbers kind of a lot. Like if we were to trim the top line off of that and look at, say, kind of some middle chunk, they're going to be off by 50, 60, 70 terms. And that gets you into a danger zone real fast. And then one that I really liked was the average recommended word count. And we're assuming these are top level pages too. Mm-hmm. The average was 2,200 words. So that was the average of the pages that we're identifying. These are the ones we need to base everything off of. Mm-hmm. The average was 2,200, and the average page that was put in was at 1,500. So they're 700 words light
Yeah.
from what they need to be competitive. They're missing their contextual terms, and most of them are lacking structure, internal structure.
Right.
And that's what LLMs are producing.
Yeah. Well, most pages are garbage out there, so it's no,
Right.
yeah, like
You
it's
know,
just sort of
but
confirming.
it's fun when you can see it within those numbers. You know, like that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you know, when SEOs are like, we're out of a job with AI now, no,
Yeah.
not not at all,
I don't know
not at
why
all.
people think that. Like it's just anyone has always been able to access tools. Like it doesn't mean, the person who knows how to use them best and has the most expertise is always going to win. Like it's not like this random person. Like if you have access to AI and a random person has access to AI, you're still going to beat them. Like not because they have
Yeah,
access to the tool, they're going to win because this is essentially a zero sum game. like
yeah,
like you know
yeah, yeah. No, it can't be stressed enough that it is a efficiency tool.
yes.
And the line that I like to use in my talks right now is that it only helps you what you do faster. So if you're bad at SEO, it's only gonna help you do bad SEO faster.
Yeah. And
That's it.
that's a great example of all the people who got into this industry like in the last 6 months or something, and for some reason they got clients and they're attacking those websites because they just that's what they're doing. They're just doing
I've
bad
seen this
SEO really
wave
fast.
so many times. I've seen this wave so many times where like there are too many SEOs and then everybody gets out and SEO's dead and then it hits this bottom and I was like, ooh, opportunity, and they come back in. But we get this like crop of new SEOs and they were probably just as bad as the ones that maybe got out.
Yeah.
You know, like, but just now they're a little more green. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you see that quite a bit. And now they've got access to what they think is technology that's just going to do the SEO for them, and it's not.
Yeah, when you mentioned the schema part, I was like, what came to my mind is like the discussion of this week of like, Google deprecating or like the FAQ schema, like the rich results and stuff
Hmm.
like that. And I'm like, they just changed the interface. It doesn't mean that that whole system doesn't do something.
Oh, exactly.
It's like
Yeah.
this still is for
FAQs are dead.
disambiguation. That's the main role it
Yeah,
has.
yeah, exactly. FAQs are dead. You shouldn't do them. No, you missed the takeaway.
But but man, like it's like 95% of people are saying it's dead and that schema's like not useful. And you put on top of that the talk that AI doesn't use it because it strips out the schema and stuff like that. And it's like you can still rank pages. Like there's still pages that are completely empty, just have a title tag,
Yeah,
and they rank just
yeah,
with schema because it
yeah.
like it's part of the system. It's just like it's still doing something, and it might be an indirect factor or something like that.
Well, I did also see somebody showing an example of that just a few weeks ago, and within the schema, when you even though it was stripped out, they still kept the title. So like the title part that was in the schema was still present.
Yeah,
So like all the schema script out, that's actually untrue. The most important thing is probably still there, and
yeah,
they kept the title.
yeah. It's sort of like I think what's actually going on is AI doesn't use schema as how it's supposed to work. It's designed to make connections between entities, like in this
Hmm.
structured way, and this thing is just seeing the text within it. Like it's not following the rules of the connections or something like that. It will maybe connect them because they're close together, but so it's not just using it as a normal search engine would. But man, if it helps the search engine, it's that's going to help your rankings. It's still going to help you get in that set of documents that the AI is going to consider. Like it's stupid not to use it if you know it's part of the system. But just because featured snippets are disappearing from an interface, I don't know. It's not enough.
Yeah, it's no, absolutely not, absolutely not. Yeah, you want to keep it going.
What do you think are other sort of industry assumptions that are sort of going around? Like, well, there's so many, but which ones just sort of irk you and just bother you?
I don't know anything recent other than what we've talked about already. That's all on my mind constantly right now. Um,
Or maybe it could be like causation misattributions when someone, like there's information and there's a conclusion that's made that has nothing to do with the information. It's sort of what you want to believe, maybe.
Yeah, I did a little test recently on like kind of the descriptive, like TLDs, like dot lawyer, dot club,
Okay.
dot, dot whatever, but not dot com, dot net, dot org.
Yeah.
And I think there's a perception that those won't rank. There's a perception that the dot com is always favored. And I found that's really not true. What I found is that you can get some of those descriptive TLDs and they're a much shorter domain and they seem to index faster. Now, long-term ranking, I'm not sure, but they do seem to index a lot faster. But then I had several go up head-to-head with a .com, and they win.
Right.
And they won in a pattern that shows me there's not much of a pattern, meaning, that there's no just a blanket deference given to the .com by search engines because it's the .com. One thing I did also find is that you can get a PMD out of it. Like if you had a term that ended like club, for example, you could probably do Bangkok's best .club and you might win the term Bangkok's best club.
Right.
Getting an EMD out of that. And then you can also get some PMDs. But I also found you can't break it up. Like I tried to do a .us to get the word bus.
Oh, okay.
So I can't remember what the first term was.
That's
but
interesting.
It ended with a B and Google won't break it up that way. But they will. It does seem that Google will break it up and use the descriptive TLD as part of an EMD or PMD situation and give you a bit of an edge, which is a tremendous opportunity. But the myth was that the .com is always best. It is wrong. Kind of getting back to an earlier point about creativity, you also need to think about brand recognition, click-through rates, stuff like that. And so where you have an opportunity to get something that might be more memorable, even if it's not quite even a partial match that would be a .com, but it's something that people will remember and they might click through or they might trust. There might be more relevance to what you can do. That's a lot of opportunity there. And it just kind of those one-size-fit-all answers of .coms are always best. That can't be right.
No.
It don't seem that it just always can't be right. But from a ranking perspective, there's a lot of opportunity. From an indexing perspective, there's a lot of opportunity. And then from maybe a brand click-through rate, niche relevance perspective, there's a lot of opportunity. And so that's kind of what the test showed. The tests weren't as fun as I thought they would be in terms of we had server inconsistency, which really kind of plagued, which was kind of a drag. One thing I did find, though, that was interesting is that, because they have .Boston or, .London and those kind of terms, and those didn't seem to help much in local search, which I found interesting, because I kind of thought if you do a Boston search with a .Boston, maybe you'd get an edge, or a .London or something like that, and we couldn't get that one to work, which was really annoying.
Wow.
I wanted that one to go. So maybe Google is looking at just the obvious. We can't give you an edge if you get lucky enough to get the .Melbourne, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to give you that edge, but otherwise it's a pretty even playing field.
That's so interesting, because that's exactly what I was thinking about. It's like, wow, this for locations must be great.
Yeah, I thought so too. I was like, oh, no brainer. Right. And then of course it didn't pan out, and I was like, meh.
Oh man.
But I guess that's fair if you think about it, in terms of just getting a local edge just because you are the .city name. Okay.
Man, it's fair, but they thought about it. It would have been great if they didn't.
But I mean, they do seem to give deference to if you're trying to rank for German terms and you've got the .de. They give.
Yeah, so the country level,
to,
the country level makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
There is a difference. You can't rank. It's very hard to rank a .au in, I don't know, Germany or something like that. If
right.
you have a competitor that's somewhat reasonable with the country level stuff, that's where Google really uses that stuff.
But at the city level, it doesn't seem like they niche down, which is a bummer.
Yeah.
Would have been a nice little thing to find out and just keep to myself.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, you just...
How are you crushing Sydney? I was like, don't worry about it.
Well, someone would have seen you pop up, and that's the problem.
All of a sudden, everything on page one is .Sydney's, and they all link back to me.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, but that's kind of all the recent stuff I've been working on, to be honest with you. Domain test. I was very fortunate to do that in conjunction with GoDaddy. They provided the domains,
right,
which was pretty cool.
Oh, that's great.
So I was able to do Yeah, so I was able to do that test with GoDaddy, and they were pretty cool to work with, and they really wanted those cities, I can tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, they were thinking, oh, we're going to sell all of
Yeah,
these right now.
yeah.
I can say that the exact match domain for local searches definitely does work. So just so people don't
Hmm.
get confused, we're talking about just dot location, which is sort of
Correct,
a
correct,
different
correct.
concept. Like I have one of my test pages is, oh, it's built with pop. It's a one-page thing. It ranks, it usually ranks number one. All the other competitors have reviews and all this stuff because they're legit
Yeah,
businesses trying to go after that thing.
right.
And I just, created that page and it works. It's fine. It took a while to get there because I did nothing to it. I just sent one link from a YouTube short to sort of try to get it indexed. But yeah, once it got to number one, it stayed there. So it stayed there for years. It's there. Like, it's
That's
cool.
amazing. Love it. Love it, love it.
You know how Google turns dials up and down? Is there something that you think is working now that had stopped working before? Like you think has sort of come back or something like that?
No, I don't, not the stuff that I look at. The stuff that I look at seems to have, it always seems to move the needle. How much so, that seems to change a little bit. But I don't know that I've seen anything that like, either way, really. Like this was working, now it's not. This wasn't working, now it is. I don't really get into a lot of testing with links and stuff like that, and I feel like that's got to have like the most volatility in anything in the industry. Where Google is really, this won't work,
Yeah.
or this will work. Maybe, and this has been out for a while, but pillar pages, really long, those 10,000, 15,000 word pages, those were really popular a few years ago. That seems to have died in popularity. I'm not sure. I think it maybe died for a good reason. Because actually, I think it died because of Centerpiece annotation more than anything, where people were writing 10,000 words for the sake of 10,000 words and getting off track.
Yeah.
You know, and I've seen some people talk about try to bring those back, and I'm not sure that's the best approach. Again, because of you can just go off track real fast. And
Yeah.
so maybe that's the chatter I've heard recently, but there's nothing really that stands out to me.
Yeah, but short pages work really well. Like
They do.
it's usually easier to get a short page to work than a long one because it's so easy to mess up the long one.
Yeah, that's true. Margin of error.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Man, this has been a great conversation. I'm happy
Yeah.
with what we were talking before we started. I'm happy we got an opportunity to talk. We've known each other like by name and just interacting online for a lot of years, but it's cool to finally sit down and just have a conversation with you. If
Yeah, I totally
people
agree.
if people want to, you know, find your stuff, where can they go?
Yeah. Well, you're going to be able to talk to me real soon through AI Kyle at Page Optimizer. Even the external chatbot will be me. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So you can have a chat. Well, we actually have to figure out, this is something that we haven't sorted yet. If somebody comes in and they're like not logged in, can they ask a question? Can they ask an SEO question?
That's interesting.
And I'm not really sure. It feels unfair to people that are inside the tool, but it seems rude to not be friendly. You know what I mean?
Yes, but maybe the core value is in not just asking for information. Like, like one thing is asking for information, but I guess the value that people get by being in the tool is actually running your own thing, getting the numbers, or maybe getting a custom answer to your situation. Like it would
Yeah,
never be able to give something custom because it would have to run a report for them, like
true.
as long as it's not running a report and it's just sort of giving a general answer, like that's fine. But the
Okay.
value is the other part,
Yeah,
right?
right. We need to sort it out, but I appreciate that perspective. We're really going back and forth and or like maybe limiting it by this or that or doing this or that. And then try to think of like different use case scenarios where like somebody comes in and is like, give me an entire checklist on how to do SEO.
Oh yeah.
We definitely limited it on that where like even if you're inside the tool, it has limits to how far it will take you.
Yeah.
Like it'll help you make a plan,
Yeah.
but you have to have the data for that plan.
Yeah.
You
Give
know, like if
me
you want a 3 month plan, we can do a 3 month plan, but we have to have the data
yeah.
that supports a 3 month plan,
Yeah.
which means you have to run the tool.
Yeah. Give me Kyle's SOPs, all of them now.
I was concerned, like the because it has seen the SOPs,
Yes. It has them.
Yeah.
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 I wonder if like there's you can do some sort of prompt injection or there's some prompt monitoring or something like that. Maybe you need an agent that's monitoring the questions that come through, just if you see if someone's trying to break in the bloody thing.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah, we've got a guy who does our security for Pop, and he does a really good job, but he's freaking out about this. He's the least on board with the plan.
Yeah.
But I trust him to do a good job.
Everyone who knows about security is just going nuts about AI. It seems there's problems everywhere. Like I don't know too
Because
much
you've
about
opened
it.
up you opened up like a direct port into
Yeah.
what you do. But you know though, like with the way GitHub it works and stuff like that, and how pushing and pulling works, like the only thing you can really do is take down the bot on the
Right.
site. That's really all you can do, and you can't access any of that information because it's all. I mean, if GitHub goes out, then there's nothing we can do.
Yeah, correct.
I'm, I'm sure they've had their security breaches, but I'm sure they're few and far between. Well, hey, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate you having me on. This has been a lot of fun. This has been a great chat. And like we talked about before the call, this wasn't the normal question, so that was really good for me.
Cool. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Just say again to people, like if they want to check out Cast Tool, Page Optimizer Pro, great tool. I've used it for a long time. Don't plan on stop using it, so it's a pretty good one. And yeah, are you speaking anytime soon? Like, can people see you somewhere soon?
Yeah, SEO Estonia in July. Come out to that. That's a good time.
Cool.
It's in Tallinn, July 9, 10, 11, 8, 9, 10,
Something
8, 9,
like that.
10.
Oh,
Somewhere in there.
people go
But
find
Tallinn is lovely that time of year. You get to meet me. We've got actually a really nice speaker lineup, sponsors and all that. This is our 4th year, so this is a real thing now, I think.
it. Yeah,
And it's a good spot. Good place to be.
that's cool, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much. Take care.